What's up, guys? Here are my predictions for UFC Fight Night happening in St. Petersburg, Russia. Second card in Russia in UFC history. And the card actually doesn't look bad at all. I mean, there are a lot of fighters that none of us know about. Usually that makes up for a good card because when fighters are coming to the UFC and making their debut, they usually really kick it up a gear and try to prove themselves out there, and especially the Russians. I mean, there is the Russian invasion in the UFC. There's a lot of prospects, a lot of young fighters here that could be something special later on. But we're going to start with Roxanne Modafferi versus Antonina Shevchenko, which is a matchup between two polar opposite styles. Right, you got Modafferi, who is more of a grappler than anything. She's going to have a major grappling advantage over Shevchenko and a major cardio advantage as well. But Shevchenko is going to have a massive striking advantage overall. I mean, her distance striking is going to keep Modafferi at bay because Modafferi doesn't really have the best entries with her striking. But she does have the threat of the takedown. And that is something Shevchenko has not faced in her career yet. Someone as high level as Modafferi, with the experience that she has. Modafferi has almost 40 fights in her career. I mean, you can't even find female fighters at all that have more fights than Modafferi does. And Shevchenko is only 7-0, who hasn't really been tested yet. This is a major test against a legit veteran, a pioneer in the sport, who is now, I would say, in the technical prime. Now, Shevchenko, even though she has a great striking style, is very similar to her sister Valentina. She likes to pull on punches a lot, likes to counter, likes to throw high kicks, snap on everything. Everything's really quick. Everything's relied on timing. With that pulling motion that she always has, there are openings for double legs. There are openings for takedowns for someone like Modafferi. And Modafferi is a very pressuring fighter, or a lot of an in-your-face kind of a fighter. Sometimes she doesn't push you back, but she's always kind of in and out on you with a high guard, very fundamental striking. I mean, she will throw punches and bunches at Shevchenko and mix it up with takedowns as well. And if there is a big weakness to Shevchenko, it is her cardio. In all of her fights, she has gassed out in the third round. Modafferi has gone 5 rounds, and she's gone 5 rounds pretty well in very high-paced fights. So my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Roxanne Modafferi. I understand Shevchenko is almost a 4-1 favorite, but I'm going to go with the much higher level grappler with much better cardio and much more experience and capable defensively in her striking. So I'm going to go with Modafferi. I'm going to go by a third round TKO due to ground and pound. And then we go to, that last name's going to be tough, Ivan Shevchenko versus Devin Clark. This is going to be an interesting fight. Ivan, even though he has never fought in the UFC before, he has beaten much higher level competition than Devin Clark has. I mean, he's fought at the heavyweight division. He beat Bigfoot, right? He beat Thiago Silva, Satoshi Ishii, Fabio Maldonado, Phil DeFries, Rigo Rodriguez. I mean, he's fought much higher level competition than Devin Clark has, and he's beaten those guys. Devin Clark has lost to guys much lesser in capabilities, right? And the way Ivan fights is kind of the way he looks. I mean, you would think he's a berserker, just super physical powerhouse who will swing hard and fast. And if that's not going to work, overwhelming you with his explosive takedowns. And that's pretty much what he is. He does throw some good spinning kicks, which is pretty surprising how quick he throws them. And he has very strong takedowns. And he mixes up his boxing with his takedowns pretty well for a heavier guy, I would say. Maybe not someone like Frankie Edgar or something, maybe not that comparable, but heavy strikes, mix up the takedowns, and gets people thinking because of that, and he has great power with his hands and great submission ability as well. Devin Clark, I would say he's like a lesser version in some ways. He's not as physical, he's not as strong, he's not as fast, not as explosive or as dangerous, but he's also very well-rounded himself. I would say he's a little bit more pressuring or a little bit more aggressive with his wrestling style. I mean, he always attempts takedowns, right? I just think at the end of the day, Ivan is just going to be a little bit too physical, a little bit too strong with more experience under his belt. So I'm going to go with Ivan, and I'm actually going to go by a second round submission. And then we go to the co-main event, Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. Now, Islam Makhachev, trains with Khabib, best friends with Khabib, has a very similar style, has fast strikes. I would say a little bit more flashy than Khabib with his striking, but he has an extremely similar grappling and wrestling game. I mean, takedowns are very similar, ground and pound very similar, the control on top very similar. Makhachev is just overall a very well-rounded fighter. He has power in his hands. Most of his knockdowns or knockouts will come because of his speed and how fast he explodes on you. But the major threat from his striking is that he can mix it up with his takedowns. He can mix it up with his blast double leg. He can mix it up with his low single leg. All sort of different techniques that can give anybody in the top 15 a problem. I mean, Islam Makhachev maybe not a top 15 fighter, but he's definitely a top 15 caliber fighter. Definitely at that level. And even though he's fighting a guy making his debut in the UFC, this is a tough fight for Makhachev. People don't know about Arman, but Arman is very capable. I would say he's a much better striker than Makhachev is. He's faster, better footwork, really in and out with his movement, great kicks as well. Kicks are his main weapon on the feet. He has extremely fast spinning kicks. His spinning back kick to the body against Junior Assunção in that first round, I mean, you're not going to see faster kicks overall, besides maybe someone like Edson Barboza, you know? But Arman also has a very capable and very respectable wrestling game. He could be pretty pressuring with it. His defense, though, is not as good as his offense, and I think that's what's going to do him in. He is susceptible to getting taken down sometimes, especially when he's throwing those kicks. And sometimes he likes to plant too much for his kicks, even though he moves a lot when he's idle out there. When he's attacking or defending or countering, he likes to plant a lot. And that's when Makhachev can really establish those takedowns. And even against someone like Junior Assunção, who isn't anywhere near the caliber of Makhachev, especially when it comes to the grappling, Arman had a very hard time getting off on the bottom. He had a very hard time defending himself on the bottom. And Makhachev has elite level grappling, elite level top control. So my prediction for this fight, even though I believe this is going to be much closer than the odds give it, Makhachev being a 3.5 to 1 favorite, I don't think the gap is that big, but I do think he's going to win. And I do think he's going to win by a third round submission or even a decision win. Should be a very good fight, and I think it's going to open some eyes. And then we go to the main event, Alistair Overeem versus Aleksei Oleinik. It's a pretty good fight, I would say, but I very much preferred the Alexander Volkov fight. That was actually a very anticipated fight for the heavyweight division, and two of the top strikers in the entire division. But now, Overeem's opponent switched from a tall, lanky, technical striker to a sneaky, shorter, crafty grappler. It's a bit of a change here, and they are friends, I believe, so it's going to be a little bit interesting. Overeem has a striking edge 100%. I mean, his striking is far beyond Olynyk's. Olynyk is a little bit too plodding, a little bit too wild sometimes. He could catch Overeem because of Overeem's chin, but technically, with the experience that Overeem has, I mean, he's just far beyond Olynyk. I mean, the knees in the clinch, the kicks from a distance, the overhand left, the straight left hand, the counter right hook, he can go to that as well. The leg kicks, the body kicks, the head kicks, the flying knees. I mean, he throws everything in the book. And for a heavyweight, it's extremely impressive how quick he is to throw these strikes. Even today, he's a lot more economical with everything he does, but with that style, he's a lot more crafty with the striking and knows when to pick his shots. And with this striking comes insane takedown defense. Fighting some of the best fighters in the world. Fighting guys like Stipe. Fighting guys with great wrestling his entire career. And Olynyk doesn't really have the greatest takedowns. He will pull guard, which could be a problem, but then again, Overeem survived Verdum's guard in 2 whole fights. So at the end of the day, my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Alistair Overeem. Fighting Verdum twice in 2 different eras, I think is going to help him tremendously fighting someone like Olynyk. Olynyk may be a little bit more sneaky with some of his chokes, but I don't think he's going to be able to break the posture if it gets to the ground, if he pulls guard or something, or Overeem drops him and goes down on top of him. And I think Overeem is just too crafty himself. I mean, he's seen it all. I'm going to go with Alistair Overeem. I'm going to go by a 3rd round TKO. Then let's look at the betting odds to see if there's anything interesting. Like I said, Roxanne Modafferi is about a 3 to 1 underdog. I do think she could win this fight very well. I think she has a high chance of winning this fight. I think people are just overrating Shevchenko because of her name, because of who her sister is, and all that sort of stuff, and not her actual abilities in there. Sergey Pavlovich is a very good prospect, a great fighter, but a 3 to 1 favorite over Marcelo Gom. I don't know about that one, man. I think it's a very close fight. It is a heavyweight fight as well. It's a bit too much of a gap for that kind of fight, I believe. Islam Makhachev, I do not think he should be that much of a favorite. I mean, some lines have him as a 5 to 1 favorite. That's kind of crazy, I think. I think Arman is very capable. I think he has the better striking. I do think Makhachev should win, but that's a big gap. And then the Alistair Overeem versus Olynyk, I actually think Overeem should be more of a favorite, but you never know heavyweight fights sometimes. I mean, Olynyk did beat Mark Hunt, who has pretty decent takedown defense himself and great power too, so it should be interesting. It's actually a very interesting card, and I think people are going to miss out on it. Are going to miss out on some good fights. So I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe. Leave a comment below what you guys think about the fights, who you guys think are going to win, what is the biggest prospect, or which fighter are you most looking forward to in this card. For me, it's Ivan Shtirikov. He's the number 1 guy I'm looking at this entire card. And Islam Makhachev, of course. His fight, I think, is a sleeper on the card because people think Makhachev is going to run right through him. So that's the fight I'm most looking forward to. And Ivan is the fighter I'm most looking forward to in this entire card. And he is a light heavyweight. We need more prospects. We need more fighters in this division. And if he proves himself here, it's going to be very exciting for his future. and with guys like Johnny Walker and, you know, all these other prospects. For my next videos, I am working on my MMA prospects for 2019 and my podcast as well. I think the next video might be the podcast. If not that, if the fights are good on Saturday, you know, if the card's good, then I might make a reaction video on that. So it's either the podcast or the reaction video. I'm going to make a breakdown of one of the fights, and the MMA prospect video probably sometime next week. So be lookout for all that. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.